Darkness has many shades, but tonight it's tinted pink. Welcome, dear listener. I'm Lady Novelist, your guide through the eerie and the unknown. You may think of pink as soft, innocent, perhaps even comforting. But what happens when that color twists into something unnatural? Tonight I bring you 3 unsettling tales where pink is not so sweet, but rather sinister. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare to question everything you thought was harmless. But before we begin, if you enjoy spine-chilling stories told with a touch of the macabre, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. You wouldn't want to miss what lurks in the shadows. And now, let's begin. I will never forget that winter, the winter I turned 60, alone in my house at the edge of the village. I had lived there for years without fear, enjoying the quiet, the trees bending under the weight of snow, the hoot of owls at night. But that winter, something came creeping into my life, something I couldn't explain. And it all began with a pink feather. It was the middle of the night when I first heard it. A soft shuffling sound outside my window. A faint rhythmic noise. As if something was dragging itself across the snow-covered ground. I sat up in bed, my heart thumping dully in my chest. The house was dark, except for the dim glow of the moon filtering through the frost-laced window pane. At first, I told myself it was just the wind, the creaking of old wood. But then a whisper of movement, soft, deliberate, brushed against my wall. My breath hitched. I swung my legs out of bed, my bare feet meeting the icy floorboards. With slow, cautious steps, I moved towards the window, peering through the frost. Nothing, only the empty yard, blanketed in fresh snow, untouched. I should have gone back to bed, but something gnawed at me. I reached for my coat and boots, wrapping myself in a thick wool scarf before stepping outside. The night air bit into my skin as I scanned the yard. The trees stood solemn, their branches rattling softly in the wind. The village lay far behind me, just distant pinpricks of light in the night. Then I saw it, a single pink feather lying in the snow just beyond my porch. I picked it up, rubbing it between my fingers. It was soft, unnaturally so, not the kind you'd find from any bird I knew. I glanced around again, my breath fogging in the cold, but there was nothing, no footprints, no signs of life. I went back inside, bolting the door behind me. That night I barely slept. 3 nights later it happened again. The same strange noise, the same feeling of something just outside. This time I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a lantern and stepped out onto the porch. The wind was still, the silence pressing down like a thick blanket. I moved carefully, scanning the trees and the path leading into the woods. Then, movement. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, slipping between the trees. My breath hitched. "Who's there?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. No answer, only the faint echo of my words carried away by the cold air. Then I looked down. Another pink feather resting on the porch steps. I shut myself inside, locking every door and window. My home, once my sanctuary, now felt like a fragile barrier between me and something I didn't understand. Over the following weeks, the occurrences became more erratic. Some nights I would hear footsteps crunching in the snow, slow and deliberate. Other times I caught glimpses of shifting shapes outside my window, too quick to make out, but enough to send shivers down my spine. Always after every encounter, I would find another pink feather. I stopped sleeping properly. I would sit up in my chair, lantern burning low, waiting, but nothing ever revealed itself. The only thing that remained constant was the unease tightening its grip around my chest. One day, needing firewood, I ventured into the forest with my axe. The trees were silent, the snow thick underfoot. I was chopping a log when I sensed it, a presence, something watching me. I turned, and there she was, A woman standing between the trees, partially obscured by shadow. Her long dark hair clung to her pale face, her lips slightly parted as if she were about to speak. She wore a tattered dress, old and frayed, and there, just visible in the dim light, were streaks of pink on the fabric. My heart pounded as I gripped my axe tighter. She didn't move, she only watched. I took a step back, but she took a step forward. I turned and walked briskly toward my house, refusing to look back. I could hear the crunching of snow behind me, her footsteps trailing mine. My house came into view and I rushed inside, slamming the door shut. My hands were shaking. For a long moment I listened. Silence. I forced myself to check the yard through the frosted window. No one. Then my stomach dropped. Feathers scattered across the snow in a dark, tangled mess. Feathers of a dead bird. Some were black, some gray, but some were pink. I knelt by the door, my breath shallow. Was this a warning? A gift? A message? That was the last time anything happened. The footsteps, the whispers, the shadows, all of it stopped after that night. I never saw the woman again. The pink feathers no longer appeared. I still don't know what it all meant. Some nights as I lie in bed, I think about the woman in the woods. I wonder if she was ever really there or if she was something else, something older, something forgotten. But I never go looking for answers. Not anymore. I've always loved pink, ever since I was a little girl. It was my color, soft, vibrant, full of warmth and happiness. My room was painted pink. My clothes, my toys, even my car, everything was pink. I drove a pink car, for heaven's sake, and people always complimented me on my cheerful bubblegum world. I had a smile that could light up any room, a soft voice that made people feel at ease. I wasn't just known for my color obsession. I was known for being friendly, sweet, and genuinely kind. Everyone loved me. At least I thought they did. On the evening of March 7th, 2025, the world as I knew it started to unravel. It was around 6:30 p.m. when I sat down to a cup of tea in my living room. The sky had grown dark, and the soft drizzle outside had turned into a torrential storm. The wind howled as it pressed against the windows, making the house groan. My pink walls seemed to absorb the sound, creating an eerie stillness inside. I wrapped a pink throw blanket around my shoulders and tucked my legs under me on the couch. I'd just settled in to watch a movie when, without warning, the lights flickered and then went out. I sat, my first instinct being to check the fuse box. "Not tonight," I muttered to myself, pushing my hair back. But as I got up to move towards the hallway, the sound came. Soft, faint, but unmistakable. Footsteps. They were slow at first, dragging, like someone was struggling to walk. My heart fluttered in my chest, and I paused at the threshold, listening. The steps continued, just outside my door. My first thought was that it must be the wind, some strange trick of the storm. But no, it was too deliberate. I couldn't help myself. I moved cautiously toward the window, my hand trembling slightly on the handle. My house, painted in every shade of pink imaginable, suddenly felt too small, as if the color was suffocating me. I opened the window, peeking into the darkened yard beyond. Nothing, just the heavy rain slashing against the ground. Then the sound changed. Someone or something was trying the door handle, slowly, methodically. I froze. Panic crawled up my spine, and I pulled the window closed with a snap, bolting it shut. My mind raced, trying to calm itself. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe they needed help. But then I heard voices. Men's voices. There were two of them, low and gravelly. Their words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding entry. I rushed to my phone, dialed the police, my hands shaking uncontrollably. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, but I could hear the tension in the background. There are people trying to break into my house. I whispered frantically. Please, hurry. Stay on the line, she said. Help is on the way. I didn't let go of the phone, not for a second. The man continued, banging on the door now, their voices growing more insistent, as though they knew I was inside, terrified. Then, just as suddenly as they had come, the noises stopped. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I didn't dare move. My phone buzzed with a notification, an alert from my home security system. I opened it, my pulse quickening. The live video feed from my front door came up on the screen. I froze. There were the men. They were standing outside my door, their figures tall, cloaked in dark clothing, but there was something wrong about them. They didn't have feet. At all. They were dragging themselves across the floor, their bodies jerking with each movement. Their hands were grotesque, elongated and withering, as though they had been ravaged by disease. And their faces, oh God, their faces. The skin was blistered and blackened, oozing something dark and foul. They had no eyes, only hollow, gaping sockets where eyes should be. My stomach churned. I could barely breathe, my chest tightening with every passing second. What were they? I had never seen anything like them before, and yet I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The men, or whatever they were, seemed to move in slow motion, dragging themselves closer to the door, their movements unnatural and sickening. Their mouths stretched into grotesque, twitching smiles, wide, too wide, as though they were relishing my terror. My finger hovered over the phone screen, ready to close the app, but I couldn't. I watched in horror as one of the figures raised its hand and placed it on the door. I expected it to pass through, some kind of ghostly apparition, but instead the man, if you could call it like that, pressed itself against the door, its body curling unnaturally as it dragged itself up, its twisted mouth pulling into a sickening grin. The moment it touched the door, the video feed went dark. A deep silence descended over the house. My breath was the only sound, harsh and ragged. The terror that had consumed me moments ago now felt like an icy weight on my chest. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Then, as if on cue, the lights flickered back on, flooding the room in a harsh, sterile light. I slowly stood, trembling, my knees threatening to give out beneath me. I dared to look through the window. Nothing. The storm raged on outside, but the figures were gone. I waited, staring out into the storm for what felt like hours. Police officers arrived, but they found nothing. The men didn't return, but something inside me had shifted. I felt watched. Every moment I made now felt like an invitation. I couldn't help but wonder, what if they came back? What if they never left? I never told anyone about the figures I had seen. How could I? They wouldn't believe me. No one would understand what I had witnessed through that webcam. And though the police came and searched the area, they found nothing. Since that night, I haven't been able to bring myself to look at anything pink. My once beloved color now feels like a cruel reminder of what happened. My home still sits on the edge of the town, painted in my old favorite color, but now it feels like a trap. Every knock on the door makes my heart race. Every shadow in the corner of my eye makes me wonder if they're back. But worst of all, I keep thinking about those faces, those blackened, plague-ravaged faces. I don't know who or what they were, but I know they aren't gone. I know they're still out there, and I know they're watching me. They always have been. I can't escape. Not anymore. It was the 13th of October 2023. The cemetery was silent, as though it held its breath. The autumn wind whispered through the skeletal branches, and the moon, swollen and yellow, hung low in the sky like a single unblinking eye. Emily clutched her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she navigated the narrow path between the gravestones. The text from her best friend Sophie had dared her. "Bet you won't steal something from the graveyard at midnight." Emily smirked. Easy. Her pink hair glowed like neon under the dim light of the street lamp at the cemetery's edge. She was fearless, or at least that's what she told herself. It was just a cemetery, nothing but bones and stones. Then she saw it. Half buried in the dirt near a crumbling headstone was a peculiar stone, unlike any other in the graveyard. It was smooth, jet black, and oddly warm to the touch, pulsing like a tiny heartbeat beneath her fingers. She slipped it into her hoodie pocket and walked home, the wind howling at her back. The first thing she noticed when she woke up was the smell. Something rotten, like wet earth and decayed flowers. Emily sat up groggily, rubbing her face. The second thing she noticed was the strands of hair curling between her fingers. Black. Her stomach lurched. She scrambled out of bed, tripping over herself as she reached for the mirror. The girl staring back at her wasn't her. Her once vibrant pink hair was fading, dark strands creeping from the roots like an infection. Her skin looked paler, almost sickly, and her eyes had a hollow quality to them. Her breath hitched. It had to be the stone. The changes weren't just physical. At school, she felt watched. Shadows slithered at the edges of her vision, shifting in ways they shouldn't. The hallways were filled with whispers, voices murmuring her name, but when she turned, nothing. Then, in chemistry class, she saw her, a girl in the seat beside her, staring with empty, soulless eyes. Her skin was gray, her lips cracked, her fingers skeletal. Emily gasped, her chair scraping backward. The ghostly figure's lips curled into a silent scream before vanishing into thin air. "Emily?" Her teacher's voice snapped her back. She swallowed hard. "Nothing," she muttered, gripping the edge of her desk. The stone burned in her pocket, an unnatural warmth radiating from it. She had to get rid of it. The darkness in her room felt alive. The air was thick with the scent of something rotting, the shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. Then came the whispers. Low guttural voices murmuring in a language she didn't understand. A pressure built in her chest, like invisible hands pressing down on her ribs. And then she saw them. Figures hovering in the corners of her room, eyes black voids, mouths twisted in silent wails. Their arms reached toward her, fingers long and gnarled. Her scream caught in her throat. The stone vibrated violently in her pocket, its heat unbearable. She had to take it back. The cemetery gates groaned as she pushed them open. The wind shrieked through the gravestones, carrying whispers from unseen mouths. Her heart pounded as she approached the grave where she had found the stone. The air grew thick, suffocating. The closer she got, the more the darkness seemed to ripple around her, shifting like a living thing. Then she saw it, the grave's inscription. Eleanor Blackwood, 1876-1899. May she find peace at last. The ground trembled beneath her feet. The whispers turned into screams. The figures emerged, crawling from the soil, their eyes burning like coals. With shaking hands, she hurled to the stone onto the grave. A violent wind erupted, howling like 1,000 voices in agony. The ground convulsed, and the shadows shrieked as they were sucked into the earth, disappearing one by one. Then silence. The cemetery returned to its eerie stillness. The weight lifted, the air clearing. Emily staggered back, her breath ragged. She knew what she had to do next. Her fingers trembled as she squeezed the bottle of pink dye over her hair. The mirror reflected her exhausted face, but as the dye soaked into her strands, she felt a shift. The cold presence lingering in her room faded. The whispers stopped. By the time she washed out the dye, her hair was pink again, and the darkness was gone. Pink will never look the same again, will it? Thank you for joining me in the shadows tonight. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe, because darkness always has more to reveal. And if you have your own tales of horror, share them in the comments below. I might just bring them to life in a future episode. Until next time, my dear listeners, sleep tight.